Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Heal community. We're back to the Heal podcast. So I'm Ruth, and today Elif and I are going to be talking about a deeply sensitive and educational topic. This is an interview conducted by Dr. Kurt Honda from Psychology in Seattle, and he is joined by a 25-year-old lady named Kay, who is a self-professed pedophile. It's her interview. So in this full-length dialogue, Dr. Honda speaks with Kay, like we said, a woman who identifies as a non-offending female pedophile. And she shares her story about her trauma as a child that she experienced. And this interview is non-sensationalized. It's a serious psychological exploration of complex stigmatized identities, trauma, and the urgent need for understanding and compassion. So we're not here today to judge. We are unpacking the story, and I'm going to give it over to you, Ella. How are you doing today, Ella?
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much for doing an excellent job with that introduction and just setting the tone for our listeners and our viewers to sort of mentally prepare for what it is we're about to embark on. I'm doing really well, Ruth, and I'm looking forward to this case study as well, because I think that within our society, there is generally double standards when it comes to certain things. And of late, I've seen a lot of female perpetrators committing crimes against children, so it's not only men that do this. And I wonder to some extent if there is an awareness or if women just think that maybe some of the rules don't apply to them, or not necessarily the rules, but the impact, the trauma impact, that it doesn't apply when it's a dynamic between a female and another female, or a female child or a male child. So this is an interesting one for me. And I certainly believe that it's going to shed a lot of awareness and light for our viewers as well. Yeah, at Healed, that is our intention always, to spread awareness, to expand consciousness, so that we can begin to understand, know more about this very predominant and ever-growing issue that we have in every society around pedophilia. So today we're going to be doing this, our case study, with a slightly different style, and we'd like to hear back from you guys. Let us know if you enjoyed this style, or if you prefer the way that we've done it previously. Please note that on this channel, at this podcast, we delve into cases that are present and happening current around sexual assault and predatory behavior towards children predominantly, okay, as case studies for the purpose of case study. But we also do interviews and case studies around the perpetrator, their experience, their life story, and how they experience themselves and society, so that we get a look at both sides of the story, or all aspects of it. We would like to contribute to holistic awareness and growth, so for the benefit of healing our communities. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to listen to this interview. This is the interview with Dr. Kirk. Dr. Kirk Honda is facilitating the interview with Kay, and this is not her real name. It is sort of a pseudonym to protect her identity. And the podcast that we are using as case study material is Psychology in Seattle. Okay, so let's begin.
And have been choosing which stories that I think would be beneficial for the audience to hear. And Kay reached out to me, and I thought that the audience might benefit from hearing her story. So thank you for having the courage to reach out, Kay, and reaching out and coming on the podcast and to tell your story. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate creating a platform to have these like really difficult conversations.
I think the recording will include a bit of a fan noise. This isn't your device. Kay, where should we begin? I'm curious as to when you first started to realize that you were attracted to minors.
Well, I have also been through childhood sexual abuse. And so my hypersexuality started as a minor. And I kind of found myself in a situation where I was growing older. Going through that in childhood, you become desensitized to certain things anyways. And so it took me a really long time through my adolescence into early adulthood to gain enough perspective to really question, like, it's not still appropriate. Now, the age I am, it's not still appropriate to be looking at minors this way. And so it's a process for me. But to answer the question, I think I would say about 18 is when I finally turned around and realized, oh, I'm actually not a minor anymore. This is not a peer situation anymore.
Mm-hmm. What was the attraction specifically that you were reacting to at the time? How old, what context, that kind of thing?
It was very normal for me because I watched a lot of hentai porn at this time in my life, and lolly porn, which for people who don't know is depicting young girls. And it really ranges like all different kinds of ages to what could be counted lolly. Sometimes it's underage characters. Sometimes it's overage characters aged down, and there's loads of different. So that's super adjacent to hentai, and so it was just kind of something that I came across a lot and started engaging with, and then turned around one day and realized this is no longer the peer situation.
I see. Hentai, lolly porn being cartoons or drawings,
yes, yeah.
Not real life.
No.
And you were looking at child depictions of sexualized characters, maybe having sex with each other or doing sexual things.
Yeah.
Or in skimpy outfits, that kind of thing, and it was turning you on.
Okay, Ruth, so let's just pause there for a moment. Anything that's come up for you yet?
Yes, I think that there is definitely a similarity here between Kay and a previous case that we looked at, which was Brandon, which is really, really interesting. So, Kay's situation, she had a little bit more understanding of her feelings in terms of where she was at in terms of her attraction to children. And this happened at a young age. So there was an awareness already at a very early stage in her life. And then fast forwarding to 18, she realized that she still had this attraction. So there was a higher level of awareness. In a previous case with Brandon, just using that as a different case study, he could not articulate what he was feeling. So huge amount of self-awareness here on her part, and then also some of the similarities still is using the what she describes as hentai. You can go look it up, guys, to manage those emotions that she was having around that. So that stood out to me. And I think it's so interesting how self-aware she was. She could articulate what she was feeling as a young child, and then again at 18, understanding that, this emotions are still with her. And another similarity there is that Brandon and Kay, both of them experienced trauma in their childhood. I think that's also quite significant.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting to pay attention to as we do more of these case studies. I don't think it can be proven that sexual trauma is tied into being attracted to minors or pedophilia, but there's definitely a link. And I tend to lean, I'm open to, perspectives can change, but I certainly tend to lean towards knowing that there is some sort of traumatic experience that contributes to this affinity. I believe that trauma of all kinds can have an effect on our sexuality. How it presents itself can depend. And some people would consider being a normie, being sort of vanilla sexually, having a vanilla sexuality is an indication of a healthy psyche, but it can also be a sign of suppression and trauma in a different way. Certainly, there is a link to how we develop, the experiences that we've had and how it contributes to our development that we want to be aware of. The way that I hear her is that, and I want to just acknowledge the comparison you make. With Brian, he talks about not quite knowing what his feelings are, not quite having that awareness, knowing that there's something, but not quite being as sort of being uncertain about what he's feeling. And with Kay, she's recognizing her attraction, she's experiencing it, but because she's the same age or of a similar age, she's not yet realizing that there might be a problem because, well, we're the same age, until she turns 18, and then she realizes, well, I don't really fall into this bracket anymore. So I wonder if the distinction between Brian and Kay could be contributed to the fact that he had quite a religious, staunch upbringing, and Kay, as what I've noticed from just going through the interview with her, she tends to be a lot more open, and perhaps her upbringing was a little bit more open. And so those could be factors where there's a slight distinction for me. He knows something is strange, so he's quite aware of the right, wrong type of thing when it comes to attraction and engagement with peers. She feels it's perfectly normal until she turns 18 and she realizes, but I'm still attracted to the same age group. I've now grown out of that age group and I'm still attracted to them. And she realizes there's a question mark here. How many youths get to the age of 18? I mean, when you're 18, you can still feel like you're a teenager. And it makes me wonder how many young adults reach adulthood or move out of that bracket, out of their teen years, and still feel like, or perhaps don't have that awareness, like, oh, maybe this is appropriate. Is it something that needs to be taught? Is it a discussion that needs to be had in the community or in household? Or do you think, Ruth, that this is something that could be overlooked? Because it's certainly very common in a lot of communities around here where I am, where older boys or females are dating teens. And my kids will say, oh, that's inappropriate. I'm going to have a talk with, and I wonder if it's because that's a conversation we've been having in our home. And maybe these other young individuals saw a lot of this kind of behavior where people of within this age bracket, they sort of count the gap, the amount of years between them and the other person, and that's how they assess it. Well, there's 5 years between us. 5 years is not so bad. Rather than which bracket do I fall into? Which group do I fall into? Am I still in the teen group or am I now in the adult group? I wonder if that is something that could be overlooked if it's not a discussion that is being had in the household or within the community, an awareness that is being spread. So that's really interesting.
I think that is something that definitely needs to be looked at in our communities. I think the first thing would be to normalize having these discussions with our children and opening their door when they do show interest in someone. Not telling them, no, you're too young. I remember when my 13-year-old came to me, I was like, okay, but I had to be a responsible parent and answer her with those questions because she's curious and she has developed feelings for someone. So normalizing having those conversations is so important, opening those doors for our children to have those conversations, whether it's gender diversity, whether it is having these emotions, being of a certain age, but coming to your parent and saying, Mom, this is how I feel, I think that is the first step. And then that opens the door to having open, stigma-free mental health education with your parents. So I think that is really important. I just wanted to go back to the you were talking about the combination of factors, which is really important. I think that's also a really important point that we need to just flesh out a bit more. I know historically pedophilia is believed to be a result from a combination of factors. Early childhood trauma definitely plays a role, and Dr. Conda speaks a lot about this. There's also possible genetic or hormonal influences, and we know that because of trauma during childhood, there is definitely an impact on the body. And then there's also other factors like neurodevelopmental differences. So it's a complex condition. It's not caused by trauma alone. So research, shows, especially here, Dr. Kirk Honda spoke about atypical brain structures, etc. And it's so interesting to see how this plays out in terms of impulse control, and we'll get into that because I love how Kay fleshes that out. And she also talks about her sexual development. But looking back to our own communities, I think, normalizing having those conversations about sexual development. When our children do come to us and say, Mom, I'm having these emotions or these urges, I think it's so important that we normalize having those conversations with our children.
Yes, certainly. Also, just before we carry on, I want to just highlight, Kay talks about desensitization. Inappropriate sexual experiences when you're still developing as a child can really desensitize you to those inappropriate sexual experiences. And you can normalize it as a coping mechanism, and then it's very easy to find it comfortable to engage in that way in the future. And this is why, in many cases, the abused becomes the abuser because they're stunted by this traumatic experience. It stunts their sexual development to the point where they cannot mature or evolve from it without treatment, support, and awareness. And if it's something that has so much shame attached to it and the stigma attached to it, they just gobble it up and keep it quiet. So it'll go unnoticed. But then it's very easy for this inappropriate behavior then to be displayed. And this is why when we recognize inappropriate behavior between children, the instinct is that perhaps the child's experienced something traumatic. We usually would say, where would a child come up with these ideas? It must have been shown, it must have been displayed, it must have been, So I find that quite interesting. Okay, let's continue.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And when you were 13, you're thinking, well, I'm a minor, that character is a minor, big deal. But when you're 18, becoming legally not a minor, that's when it started to concern you. Did you think when you were 16 or 14 that you would grow out of it, so to speak, as you aged, or what was going on?
It got left alone for a really long time because I was having a separate sexual arc involved with, again, as a survivor of sexual violence, there's a lot of kink, a lot of sexual therapy, some of which, having to seek in spaces with pedophiles who are okay with grooming minors. I was putting myself in unsafe situations and re-traumatizing myself a lot as well. And then coming into adult kink spaces and going through that transition. That took up so much of my time and attention for so long that I could pretty much just ignore it. I'm not, people talk about being exclusive pedophiles, so people who are only attracted to children. Fortunately, I don't have that, so I got to spend quite a few years doing other stuff and basically ignoring it. And then it came back to bite me on the ass a couple of years ago, and I was forced to kind of confront that it was not going to go away and how to deal with that.
Another very interesting aspect to this interview, to her story, he asks her, Dr. Cook asks her, during her teenage years, she has certain experiences. She's aware of being attracted, obviously, to peers and people of different age groups. And then suddenly she turns 18 and she realizes that she's still attracted to kids. But she talks about what I could recognize as a form of escapism, and how her sexual trauma exacerbates her sexuality in a sense. She then escapes into a very dangerous environment if unsupervised. Well, there is no safe environment, right? Even if you go to church, if it can be a dangerous environment. Even if you in a family household, it can be a dangerous environment if you have an affinity to a particular type of dynamic. But she talks about getting lost or escaping into, or sort of being distracted by this environment that is based on kink, exploring her sexuality in other ways, and in a sense finding herself being re-traumatized without realizing it, because she's now being preyed upon pedophiles in this kink arena, and she's normalizing it. Could be another way in which someone normalizes their trauma or further leans into that desensitization. Okay, so for our viewers, who may not know what kink is, it's sexual practices and concepts or fantasies that are not conventional, but they're a turn on, right? So they stimulate the individual sexually. It's not your normal, regular sexual experiences. So, and for a while, she doesn't, it's not something that comes up for her, because she is replaying the dynamic where she is the younger individual being engaging in sexual experiences with older people. And it's normalized in whatever environment that is, but obviously taken advantage of. Every space, that you enter into, if there's no self-preservation and self-awareness around what is healthy for me, can be a dangerous space for an individual. And then obviously she emerges from that and then finds herself suddenly, I have not escaped being attracted to younger individuals.
Yeah. It's really interesting, again, the level of self-awareness that Kay has. In the interview, she shared how she is trying to make sense of her sexuality, and she portrays it here in this piece that we just listened to, by exploring kink, and there's other things like BDSM, I think, which she talks about further down the line. as a way to reclaim control, but also find her identity. And
Yeah.
what I get from this for her, these experiences were an attempt to normalize what had been done to her. But then at the same time, she was re-traumatizing herself. It's an attempt to rewrite the narrative of her abuse in a context where she had power and choice. But like you said, these were unsafe spaces. So
Yeah.
this looks like a coping mechanism amongst, I've heard of this in other survivors of sexual abuse, where they try and reclaim agency through reenactment. Okay, obviously this environments, they were totally unsafe. But as we see with Kay, she is going to be talking about the support that she got. You know, I'm thinking about people in the community that are not getting the support that they need. Without deep therapeutic support, this sort of behavior can unintentionally reinforce trauma patterns rather than heal them. That is why it's so important to get the support from people who we have a community, a real community on Patreon, where we offer a course. It is so important to get that therapeutic support once you have gone through sexual abuse trauma. Because as with Kay, we can see she went on a rampage. She explored different things. What Kay needed wasn't just a space to explore her identity, but for me, it feels like she needed a space to grieve and to process and to safely reconstruct her relationship with her body and her story. That is what is coming through for me in this last clip that you played, Ella.
Yeah. Certainly, King, there's nothing wrong with King. BDSM spaces, communities can be very safe. But in Kay's experience as a youngster, as a minor, I feel like initially she was trying to escape something, and this became her journey towards self-discovery. That was very damaging, but in the end, I suppose created a path for her long term. It would just be nice if individuals didn't have to become vulnerable and get lost in order to find themselves first, because there are communities and there are more safe spaces. And I wonder if the escapism into this King community and then coming across people who took advantage of that was not what later caused her to emerge, perhaps more aware of what she perceives to be what is dysfunctional. It's not just perception; it's them still being attracted to minors. So, right, let's continue.
Okay. And what age? We're trying to protect your identity. So, what age range are you right now?
Mid-20s.
And what happened recently?
So, having been through the stuff that I did go through in childhood, I grew up with a lot of mental illnesses, self-harm and suicidality and stuff like that, and got into drugs at quite a young age as well. And again, that's probably another reason why I could kind of package this part of myself away and ignore it, because I just had a lot of other stuff going on. And part of that was addiction and recovery took up a lot of my time and energy for a really long time. And it was in those addiction recovery spaces that I started internalizing some of the lessons of rehabilitation and what rehabilitation practically means. And it means an atmosphere of not having shame over thoughts, an atmosphere of community and support, divesting like your thoughts and your actions as two completely different things, and your thoughts not being normative, not having any kind of like objective moral value about you as a person. So that was the first seed probably that allowed me to start having this conversation with myself again. And then I also learned there that in order to rehabilitate, you have to have people around you who know horrible, dark things about you and love you anyways. And I get that not everyone is equipped to do that. And I think that's why peer support spaces for addiction are so effective. And then I also learned about the history of a lot of those support groups. And they were like illegal originally, and people had to meet in, back rooms and keep it all very hush-hush and very secretive because you'd be completely ostracized from society. And I really do believe that we'll look back one day on these kinds of conversations as just like we look at addiction. Well, not the same because it's not the same thing, but you know what I mean. I forgot where I was going with that.
Powerful point.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible, with time, certainly, the more we have these types of conversations, the more we bring these types of conversations and topics into one another's household, the more we move past a lot of the ignorance and the stigma and the fear, and we begin to expand just consciously on every subject. It's crazy now to think that recovery groups for alcoholics and drug addicts were illegal, and it was shameful when it is such a problem and it's destroyed so many families, that now that it has successfully contributed to so many people's recovery, to people regaining their lives, and the idea that someday we will have support groups that would create safe spaces, non-judgmental spaces where people who feel broken, who feel like the monsters, who feel pathetic and invaluable, can feel accepted and loved for who they are, and that contributes to recovery. We have a course in recovery on Patreon. It's something that we feel really passionate about. So this, for me, the fact that she highlights that, because I feel like this was the turning point for her.
Yes.
When her addiction, which was obviously the way that she was numbing. And I think we need to pay attention to the fact that when young children seem to have such destructive behavioral patterns, it is a cry for help. And as a society, we are just not adequately set up for these types of complex, traumatic experience. We just respond to their bad behavior. What can you do? Go to a psychologist. We're not sufficiently set up for this type of thing unless you we have recovery centers that cost a lot of money. Success rate is not so great. It's back and forth. Because I think this is why a lot of recovery centers invite the family in, because it has to be a family process. It has to be a family process. You can't heal in the same environment that broke you. And as a family unit or as a community, we don't always want to acknowledge that when something happened to a loved one at the hands of someone else, that we play a role. We're a part of that dynamic. We sort of separate ourselves or distance ourselves from it. And in our community, certainly when it comes to trauma, the get over it, opinion and dynamic is so rife, and it comes from just feeling so ill-equipped and inadequate in the face of some of these traumas. So we want to minimize the trauma. But when you have a young individual behaving so destructively and just seeming to look for every and any opportunity to get themselves into trouble with this rebellious sort of behavior, it is an indication that something terrible has happened, and this child is bearing the weight. This young individual is bearing the weight far too heavy for him or her to carry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is such a beautiful example, okay, of education that's infused with love, because she got the support in the end, and she had people supporting her, and we can see here how powerful that is. Because when we offer love and support instead of shame, we create the conditions where people can choose integrity and healing and safety for themselves and for others. And I love what you said, Eva. It is a community effort. So healing it's not linear, as we know, it's an ongoing thing. And Kay, she identifies her triggers as well. So for us to move past the stigma of pedophilia, especially in this case, as Kay has put it out so beautifully, with the individual, is she's non-offending and she actively sought the help. We shift the conversation from judgment to prevention and from fear to compassion. And I just want to say that pedophilia is not the same as child abuse. I really want to highlight that, because there are people with these emotions that do not offend. Many people who live with these attractions, they don't offend and they desperately want support. But the stigma in many communities often keeps them in silence, and that increases isolation, number one, and I also think risk as well. But we can see here in this case, for Kay, her breaking point was also her turning point. She went out and explored her sexuality in unsafe spaces, and then her breaking point was getting that education, that support, and then feeling that love. I think that she really reiterates. And that's what helped her step out of that place. And she took responsibility for her healing, which is also so powerful.
Yeah. I think that the 12-step program is incredible. And to me, I can just see how this was the turning point for her, and that's why it saved so many people's lives, and it really does work, because addiction support groups are judgment-free. It's not, it's judgment-free, but it also fosters accountability and personal power. There's no sort of projecting blame on anybody else, but you are not going to be beaten down for your challenge. Your challenge is recognized. You're not judged for it, but at the same time, you are made aware that you have the tools to support yourself too. And that judgment-free space is so important. We don't have many judgment-free spaces. And if our homes can become judgment-free spaces, I think that will begin to drastically change the world. Why is it that many of us need to lose ourselves in addiction, lose ourselves in mental turmoil and other things, to then find our way to a group outside of our the people who are supposed to love us, to then find a space where we get to just exist without judgment. It is a difficult thing because families tend to project a lot of their needs onto other family members. It's something I became very aware of, where your family members love you through the lens that is self. They sort of see you as an extension of themselves. So they take everything that you do personally. This was very damaging for me in family dynamics, especially someone that grew up in different households. When a family, when people would take me in and offer me a home and offer me a safe place and refuge, it was always conditional, because they couldn't just love me unconditionally as an individual who was going through my own things and traumatized. There would be a tendency sometimes to take where I'm at personally. And it's very oppressive when you're struggling. It's a challenging thing, but it's certainly a challenge that I think households and families who want to be healthy and contribute to the healthy development of their family as a whole and their family as an extension, to understand that we have a tendency of saying, I'm not judging whilst we're judging. I'm
Yeah.
not judging
Yeah.
whilst we're judging. And also, prayer doesn't work. When somebody's struggling, saying
Mm.
that fix your clothes and do the right thing, I'm going to pray for you. I know you're upset, but I'm going to pray for you. Prayer doesn't work.
Mm.
This is something that is I'm very passionate about, because of my own experience and how introspective I've been. So many people love their loved ones, but they're not willing to develop the courage to confront things that are unhealthy.
Mm. Mm.
And someone who has been traumatized, even when you've gone through a healing journey, I cannot feel safe with someone who I cannot trust will protect me from narcissistic abuse or inappropriate sexual abuse or emotional abuse. It's why I am so zero tolerant about the people that are in my life. So, and then confidentiality is also very, very important in these addiction recovery spaces. So you can talk and you can share, and you don't have to worry that Auntie so-and-so, who you've just confided in, is now going to tell the rest of the family when she gets pissed off with you.
Mm.
They respect your confidentiality. They honor your story. It can be a messy, broken story, but it's not used against you in those spaces. It's a safe space. Someone's not going to treat you differently or judge you if they haven't seen you in 3 or 4 meetings, like what happens in some religious organizations. It's so conditional, so many of our spaces. There's a shared experience. People understand what you've been through. So many people out there who haven't experienced what we've experienced cannot comprehend. And even when we explain it to them, unfortunately, there aren't many people who have not experienced what we've experienced. But that shared experience is really, really important and such a powerful space for healing. Within these recovery groups, there's emotional support without attachment to your outcome. So it's in this moment, I'm supporting you emotionally, whether you do something that re-traumatizes you tomorrow, whether you relapse tomorrow. When you're ready to come back, we just accept you with the same open arms. There's no attachment to your outcome, so then no one's trying to control you. And the 12 steps provide a spiritual path that is free of projection or religious doctrine. And that is that's very powerful and empowering. It's important when it comes to healing and when it comes to growth and evolution, to respect other people's beliefs. You get to find a connection with the God of your understanding, with the source of your understanding. There's nothing being projected. And so it's simple. And then there's the 12 steps, which obviously I'm not getting into here. You guys can go and Google it and check it out, because it is incredible. It's an incredible program. But the reason why I wanted to highlight this is because in Kay's story, in Kay's life experience, this is a magnificent turning point for her, where she gets to take everything that she's experienced, all of her challenges, and she has the steps and the support to be able to process it and implement it and respond to it and deal with it in a way that makes her able to face life, So if we can begin to just incorporate some of this into our households, I think it will make a very big difference. And it does take some being really honest with oneself. But this is certainly the type of space that we create at Healed with the Course in Recovery. So I think that's very, very important.
We will definitely leave the link below. Elif,
Yeah.
I love what you said there. We must remember that healing is a sacred journey. Each one of us has our own sacred path. And like Elif said, there is, in our course that we offer, there is respect. There is two people that have gone through some of this trauma and experiences. And healing takes a lot. It takes courage and self-awareness. Kate spoke about that at the beginning of the interview. Now, like what you said, Elif, that we're not here to impose any beliefs on anyone. This community is about acknowledging the person behind the struggle, because we've been there and we know what that feels like. It is seeing beyond the label or the labels that are often given to individuals. It's about recognizing the human being, that one that is often carrying deep wounds. And if I look back at my life now, I cannot even recognize that person anymore. That is the power of healing, and that is what is being offered here. So if you'd like, guys, we will leave a link below. If you would like to email us, if you want more information, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah. Right. Let's continue.
Well, so in your 20s, it sounds like you started to have the space and the safety and the wherewithal and the courage to recover from your childhood, both what happened to you and what you had done. And there were some experiments, it sounds like, around where to go to heal and feel like you can share and have community. And you found support groups and recovery groups and philosophies regarding addiction. And that was fulfilling and helpful. And you thought maybe there's also a similar community and a format for minor attracted people or for people recovering from sexual abuse as well. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. But I'm still working on building that community because it's still been so stigmatized in my own mind that I have done a lot of this alone, where now retrospectively I wish I hadn't, and I didn't have to. There was a community out there, but I was so full of shame for even needing to seek it that I thought I had to do it alone.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you listened to the 2 other interviews with pedophiles. With Brandon, he talked about community a lot. Did that inspire you to reach out to that sort of community or to that community specifically?
Yeah. And just to have an example of like people who are okay with themselves and okay with going forward to have a happy and healthy life and it not needing to hurt anyone.
I'm curious what it was like to listen to both of those episodes for you. Let's talk about the first one, Jay, that came out a year ago-ish, a couple years ago. What was it like to hear his story? His story was one of loss and grief and a lot of insecurity, isolation, and that eventually he was pretty distraught, I think suicidal from my memory, and he started to groom his niece and didn't harm her, according to him. Others might argue otherwise, but he tells his brother, his brother and his brother's wife reject him, and then his dad dies. And there was just all this painful, but eventually he got to a place where he did find community and did find the non-offending minor attracted person's community and felt like he was at the beginning of recovery and therapy and healing and getting his life back or having a new life. And that's when he reached out to me to be interviewed. What was it like listening to that interview?
Well, yeah, really impactful. I saw a lot of myself in it. And I think definitely really interesting just from a psychological perspective that we've come from really, really different places and ended up in the same place. One of the things that I've found really interesting about So I also did sex work for many years. I was a dominatrix. And so I learned a lot from my clients about how like sexual fixations evolve from childhood and how fetishes evolve from like often seemingly innocuous events that kind of develop this sexual aspect to it. I think that it was definitely part of me. It was definitely part of me bridging the gap between being able to accept one kind of story around this and another kind of story around this. Because if it's possible for me to live my life not like harming someone, but still, I can really word that better.
By the way, for the listener,
I'm just going to pause it there. You want to say anything, Ruth, at this point?
I think that it's so interesting. Kay speaks about having the courage to speak up in the beginning, but then she says that the interview with Brandon also contributed to her courage. So here we can see the more we use our voice to speak our truth, we empower others through that. That was so powerful for me what she said there. If you listen to the interview with Brandon, and immediately she thought, wow, I see myself in the story. And if this person can do it, then so can I. And that gave her the courage to speak up and take action. And that is how powerful it is when we use our voice to speak our truth. And from there, she got the support that she needed. So we can see that Brandon, the interview that we had a couple of weeks ago, that had far-reaching effects. And this is what happens when we share our stories, when we speak up, when we take action. This is really, really powerful. I absolutely love this book.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it doesn't matter how disgusting you might think you are, or how disgusting you might think another human being is for being the way that they are, or for doing what it is they do. You are foolish if you think that we don't all have the capacity to do real damage and harm to another human being. And I think that ignorance makes us more dangerous than anything else. Because with the amount of situations that come out and have come out on a daily basis, where these kinds of situations come to light, and if 100 of them come to light, there is 1,000 of them that hasn't come to light, that's gone hidden. It is evident that more people in our community have these types of challenges, have these types of propensities than we want to acknowledge. Someone in each and every family, at least one or two people in each and every family, is a pedophile. And the easy thing is just to put your nose in the air and say, oh, they're disgusting, they don't deserve to live. But if it's about doing harm, certainly everybody must be held accountable if they make that decision. There are arguments around whether or not people who commit violent crimes, who are found to have tumors on the brain, where there is something in that physiologically contributing to that behavior, should be held accountable. I personally feel, yes, you should be held accountable because you still, you took the action. And even if it wasn't a conscious thought, you're still a danger to society. So you should perhaps at the very least be removed from society. If you have impulse control and you harm children, you need to be held accountable. But the stigma and the opinion of that we have as a society to these people is more harmful than it is helpful, because we just immediately shut the door to any education and any awareness to start to contribute to being a solution to the problem, as opposed to just being like, well, we should just hang them all because then we should hang all of the rapists and we should hang all of the, of everybody that commits crime to harm other people. So I just wanted to touch on, she talks about doing some sex work and being a dominatrix. So a dominatrix is a form of role play. It is associated with BDSM, and BDSM is bondage, discipline, or domination, sadism, and masochism as a type of sexual practice. Okay, it can be a combination of, it can be all of, it can be just one or two of those. Kink is associated with it, and fetish is associated with it. So as I've said before, kink is a practice. Concepts of fantasy. So the dom would be the dominant one and the partner would be submissive. And so in understanding this, you can see how someone who might have felt powerless in a previous experience would then be excited by being in control and then being able to dominate someone else. Okay. Fetish is a form of sexual desire in which gratification is strongly linked to a particular object or activity, and it can also be body parts other than sexual organs. So feet, foot fetish, those kinds of things. But gratification is associated with it. Without that object, there is no gratification. So just for our viewers who may not know. So I wanted to touch on that before, because she goes into quite a bit of detail about this.
I'm probably editing out a lot of silence, but I really like the fact that Kay stops to think. Not a lot of people do that. It's a sign of wisdom and maturity to think long and hard. Give it the amount of time to come up with what you want to say, because to expect us all to be able to, off the top of the dome, be able to fully and articulately express ourselves is unreasonable. So I'm going to edit out these silences, because typically silences, people think that their phone has died. So, okay. How do you want to put it?
It was very impactful, and it was part of me bridging the gap between, if I can accept that I don't want to hurt people and that's not fundamentally at odds with who I am, then that could be true for someone else whose story is completely different from mine, but who has arrived at the same destination. And yeah, it goes back to the addiction support groups. Is I just learned about how unhelpful some of those judgments can be, but then this really helped me contextualize it into this conversation.
Right.
I want to touch on this very quickly, because in that part of the interview and her expression of it, she clearly chooses her words very carefully. She's very, very thoughtful. She understands the weight of her words. Obviously, because she's listened to the other interviews, and there is a great awareness of automatic judgment that's going to come her way. She's obviously very aware of that. But in what she's expressing, she's also acknowledging that she's got a natural tendency to question whether or not someone else who is attracted to minors can be believed when they say, I didn't actually act on my attractions. That's what she's acknowledging. And the support groups that she's been a part of has helped her to remember that judgment is not helpful, and that there is a chance, and this is often what I say to clients, when clients doubt or struggle with trust, I always say, you cannot be the only good person in the world. Are you good? Are you honest? And then you can trust that you're good. You can trust your integrity and that you're honest. So then, is it rational to believe that there are more people like you in the world? And would it benefit you to believe that more of the people that come around you are like you than not, that their intention is to be good, and that you can trust them until there is evidence otherwise? Don't be blind to the evidence otherwise. Believe people when they tell you who they are with their actions and so forth. But if they've not given you any reason to doubt them, you're just driving yourself insane, doubting them. So I find it interesting, because she's acknowledging that she's probably like everybody else thinking, if you're a pedophile, you're going to
Mm.
tell me you didn't do anything or you didn't want to. You're
Yeah.
not, you know, you're not going to want to believe it. It's going to be tough to believe. But that it's probably true that people who say that they haven't, or that their intention is not to harm, that they will do everything in their power to avoid harming anyone.
Yeah.
You want to add to that,
Absolutely.
Ruth, or should I continue?
I think we can continue, Ella, because there's still quite a bit to go through.
Well, not so much now, but it's still around. But particularly in the past, it was seen as a weakness of your psychology or your morality or even your spiritual self. It was seen as you were letting the demon in or the devil, or you were choosing evilness, essentially.
I'm going to skip this ahead for a
In
little bit
more
because
contemporary time.
I'm going to skip ahead here because he speaks for quite some time. So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to, where was it?
The key difference is I just had to choose whether I wanted to live or not. I was at a point where I couldn't ignore it about myself anymore, and I had the choice. And I tried to kill myself several times over this already. It had become clear that I was not finding a solution. And, as with many things, repressing it doesn't work. It just bubbles back up. And I just had to question, do I fundamentally think I'm a bad person? Do I really think I don't deserve to live? And the answer was no. And so I was forced to seek help against my better judgment, knowing that there are plenty of people who are going to listen to this and still think that I deserve to die. There are plenty of people who are going to listen to this and just say they're just not ready to even start having that conversation. And so I hope that my story as a female who has also been through childhood sexual abuse will help open that conversation for some people, because I had to get to a point where I was deciding whether to live or not. I just don't think we need to get to that point. I think that, there's a wealth of evidence that proves that harm reduction reduces harm. And so I view harm reduction as a really important step, the really important next step in having this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Harm reduction regarding being attracted to minors? Yeah,
so I personally view fictitious cartoons drawn by adults for other adults or created, on a computer or whatever, as harm reduction content, because having worked with clients for a few years who are into some very wacky, wild and extreme stuff, I have learned that an aspect of human sexuality is that some people just are like this, and some people can be very happily married and have a completely normal life, the picket fence, wife, kids, dog, etc. And every so often they just need to go and see someone and have the crap beat out of them. And that's just part of their life. It's something that they do regularly, and then they get on with the rest of their life. Sometimes we, for whatever reason, have certain sexual urges that need to be satisfied in some way. And so if I can look at a cartoon and no child is hurt in the making of this, I'm not contributing to any industry that I don't agree with morally, and then get on with the rest of my life, I think I should be allowed to do that.
Yeah, there's definite debate even within the no map, not offending minor attracted people community. I've heard both things. Well, I think what you're implying is that it's harm reduction in that, yeah, it'd be nice, I suppose, if we didn't have to have this sort of thing, but it is a way for people to get their needs met without harm to children. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, harm to themselves as well. There's a lot of other, in child sexual abuse material, there's a lot of other harms that go on as well.
I'm curious, have you been through treatment, therapy?
What kind of therapy?
Whatever, but also, clinical help.
Yes, I've had a lot of talking therapies, and I would consider a lot of the kink stuff I've done sexual therapy, although not administered by accredited therapists.
Has the talk therapy helped?
Yeah.
How so?
Helping me challenge what my values actually are and how to live in accordance with them, and challenge, even after I've come to a realization that I can live a normal life being the way that I am, there's still a lot of work you need to do around that. I still have to challenge the shame and the guilt, and it's really easy to spiral, especially when I know there are plenty of people in the world that literally want me to die. It's helped me unpack and cope with where my own fixations have come from too. So as a minor, I was very hypersexual. And that, for me, has to be related to my pedophilia, right?
And how has sex work or kink helped you to heal and help you? You seem to be implying earlier that, or maybe you said this, that the sexual activity you've engaged in has been healing for you. How so?
So a lot of therapy is essentially exposure therapy, right? You're kind of facing a very difficult feeling or a trigger and working through that in a safe environment and teaching your body that you're not in the unsafe environment anymore. And so doing a lot of like quite extreme kink stuff helped me process living with complex PTSD. And I had to work through those really extreme aspects of my sexuality to get to a place where I was happy to just have normal sex with a normal partner.
It's interesting. Yeah. So I've treated a lot of clients along these lines, and that what I'm hearing hints of is the following, and you please tell me if any of this doesn't apply, that you have someone that goes through complicated trauma because it's ongoing and it's with someone that is supposed to be safe, maybe a family member, an attachment figure, or a teacher, someone that isn't just assaulting you anonymously in an alleyway. It's someone that you're in a relationship with. And it complicates it because it infuses trauma and harm and all that comes with sexual abuse. It infuses all that with attachment, with relationships, with your idea of the self, with your idea of the other. And it's ongoing, so there's a lot of opportunity for circuits in our neurons to wire itself along these lines. So it makes it very hard to break those circuits or create new circuits. And there's a lot of ways to react to this and to recover from it. But for some, as an adult, they will find themselves attracted to or thinking about or maybe even purposely going down this road therapeutically to BDSM or kink or situations that are reminiscent of the abuse, whether it's age difference or power difference or violence. But in the kink community, it's understood that these are consensual things. There are rules, there are agreements, there's communication. There are bad actors within this group. Sometimes they will infiltrate because they're sadists and they want to harm. But the kink community is, at least the ones that I know about, because Seattle has a fairly robust kink community, has had for a long time, that they are very aware of this unsafety, and they're also very aware of trauma emerging during kink sessions and have very sophisticated ways of understanding this, way more sophisticated than the average therapist does, honestly. And the thought is, and certainly there are a lot of clinicians and researchers that are aware of this and write about it and research it to some extent, in that as you find yourself attracted to, because we have this mechanism in our psyche that Freud even identified, repetition compulsion, that sort of thing, that is attempting to heal by recreating. And sometimes that can backfire, right? If you are raped or sexually abused, younger in life, without awareness and without a pathway, maybe without community to guide, mentorship, then we might literally create rapes where we're re-traumatized in an unconscious attempt to heal. But of course, it just compounds the trauma. But if you can recreate the scenario and you have power this time, and there's smiles and cuddling and eye contact afterwards, and you are doing it on your terms, it can have that exposure therapy nature to it. I would also call it a corrective experience. It's recreating the physicality of it or the relationship of it. It feels like it, sort of looks like it, has the vibe. But this time, I'm not being victimized. I'm not powerless. I do have power this time. I chose to do this. I'm monitoring myself as I go through it. And I might even have an ongoing relationship with this person, building trust through this. Because one, when I engage sexually with, normies or non-kink people, they don't want to do this thing, and it doesn't feel right to me because I'm gravitated toward the first step of my sexual emerging self, which is to heal before I can feel. I need to recover to some extent before I can just relax and enjoy sex the way that it's, there's a lot of breadth to the experiences of sex, but it's like there's this blockage within me that has to be unblocked, and then I can sort of discover my sexual self, right?
And now I'm getting to have some of that experience.
Skipped ahead because I think we got the gist of it. I didn't want to skip his part too soon because there was a lot of a lot of valuable bits that he added to it. But before she continues or says anything, she talks about the fact that she knows a lot of people want her dead, and this is a reality. Most people will say if you bring up the topic of a pedophile, that will be their response. Are we so primitive as humans, that if we have a problem that we don't know what to do with it, we do what we do with cockroaches and we just step on them, So imagine what it's like living in a world where, everybody wants you dead. And then I wanted your opinion, and I certainly want to know from our viewers, what do you think about harm reduction? What are your thoughts about harm reduction? Please put it in the comments. Let us know so far what you're thinking as you go through the interview with us. When you have thoughts, put it in the comments because we would definitely love to have an opportunity to create space to delve into some of your comments or your questions or your perspectives, okay? Because your opinion counts too. We want to grow together. Should kink, BDSM be further developed? Since we recognize that there's just not enough, obviously not for kids, okay, but maybe different types of expressions, maybe different forms. Should these avenues be further developed in a safe way, along with psychologists and experts in these fields around the world for within safe spaces and facilities for people to have this exposure therapy to heal and recreate the experience with awareness and within a safe space? What are your thoughts? Are these, because obviously people are creating their own communities because there's so much shame, and there's a lot, obviously, then people who want to take advantage of that, infiltrate these spaces because they're hidden and they can do harmful things too.
Absolutely.
Ruth, Kay also expresses something that I think we should be aware of. Because of a sexual experience in early childhood, that traumatic experience, she became hypersexual as a minor. Not all of us have that response. Some of us suppress our sexuality. But that could be the case as a result of an experience like this. A minor can become hypersexualized and then as a result, become a victim seeking out predatory behavior.
And so that could often re-traumatize a lot of people. And she is so open about her experience. I just want to go back to what you said about society often demonizes pedophilia, because automatically, when I've spoken to people about pedophilia, they equate that thoughts or the thought patterns that pedophiles might experience with action, which is not always the case. Certainly, we can see with Kay, she's decided that she is not going to take action. She's going to seek out therapy. She's going to explore different avenues. So, casting all individuals with these attractions as evil or dangerous, even without distinction, we can see how that plays out in society. And there is a lot of judgment in society. When you talk about pedophilia, people often think, wow, that's a bad person. But this broad stroke judgment, it fosters fear, it fosters silence, and it leaves no space for what we really need. And that brings me to the question that you asked about harm reduction. Harm reduction for me means that there is a prevention-focused approach that aims reducing risk and suffering without any sort of judgment or shame. And this can be done through education, like on these different matters. I mean, when do we have these discussions? I don't know if you have it in your friend circle. I definitely have it in mine. We talk about kink and what is BDSM and bondage, etc. So, in the context of pedophilia, I think that it is so important to have these discussions. And you spoke about having access to therapy. Now, not everybody has, in being in various different countries, I'm not sure what the social structures look like in every country. It's different in every place. But there are communities, various communities, and guys, you can look on Google. There are communities, non-offending communities that have support structures that you can look into. That is really, really helpful. Because, like Edith said, creating safe spaces, that is one of the ways that we are going to help these individuals come forward and speak about these attractions. And just in terms of harm reduction, I also want to say, at its core, I feel that harm reduction, it could save lives and it protects potential victims through understanding and not the silence.
Shame, guilt, compulsion, shame, guilt, compulsion. I was just really reenacting a lot of the same things that I was in my addiction, just in a different form. But this, obviously, as a survivor, having been through living with the effects of childhood trauma, there's no way to reconcile the thought of harming a child. Okay, I need to say that a different way. I was going to make a point about equivalency, but I can't remember where I was going. What was the question?
I don't remember, but I was thinking of the question, and I was just about to jot it down. Well, first off, let's take a break.
Okay, guys, so we're taking a pause, okay? And this segment of the case study is finalized for this week. We're going to continue with part 2 of this case study within the next 2 weeks. Possibly we'll be uploading that because we don't want to make it too long and for it to become too tedious and boring. But we would love to hear back from you. If you're looking forward to part 2, put it in the comments. Let us know what you thought about today's case study. This interview with Kay was super interesting. Lots of interesting subjects that came up, lots to think about, and we'd love to hear back from you. So keep a lookout for part 2 and other upcoming videos and podcasts. We will be doing another true crime case next week, very possibly. But we are doing our utmost best to keep the content coming for you guys. So thank you for showing all of your support, likes, subscriptions, sharing this information. We're all in this together. Let's spread the knowledge and let's be an active part of the solution to this very big and ongoing problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elif, and see you guys next time. Don't forget to look up the links below. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.